So the why is to get that positive feedback from your staff growing, plan coming together. Clients, it's a heady thing when people are happy with what you do. Obviously, it's a form of flattery. And that's one of the things that keeps you going.
This is Brandon Turner, and you are listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast.
Watching this on YouTube, make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons. If you're listening to our podcast, go leave us a 5-star review. All of our links can be found in the video description or show notes below. Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavagioni, and today's guest is Tony Saliba. Tony, I'm super excited to have you on the show today. It's a Saturday, so I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me on your weekend. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. Great to see you.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, so it's great to see you as well. And Tony, I want to kick this off the same way I start every podcast episode. And me and my audience would like to know a little bit more about you. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, share your story, tell us, who is Tony Saliba?
Well, my history would probably go under necessity as the mother of invention. Literally wanted to be a journalist, a writer, sports writer. And in college, the obligatory counselor said, well, journalists don't make very much money. You're going to make about $4,000 a year. And, good luck on that. And I said, well, I want to replace the White Sox broadcaster. At the time was Harry Carey. And the guy said, that's a 1 in a million. You're never going to do it, kid. I said, well, who makes all the money after school? And they said, well, the nation needs accountants. This is 1973. So I went into accounting. And then when I finished, along my way, which was really like a spoonful of medicine, right? I was at a little 500 event at Indiana, the greatest college weekend, and one of the alumni said, Saliba, what are you going to be doing? You're graduating in a few weeks. And I said, I don't know. I'm being courted by, Procter and Gamble and General Electric, for sales. And the guy said, did you ever think about being a stockbroker? And I'm like, no. And what's that like? And he said, well, I'm in Indianapolis. And I said, I thought all the brokers are in New York or Chicago. Being from Chicago, that would have been natural. So he said, no, we do it on the phone. So I'm thinking, hello, New York, buy, Chicago, sell. But I was really an account executive for a small regional Indiana brokerage. And then those were the Jimmy Carter malaise days and, big volume day on the NYSE, full day, 11 million shares. And we do that in the first heartbeat of the first moment of the day today. So I asked the guys the same question that I was working with. Who makes all the money in this industry? And they said the guys on the floor. So I went back to Chicago and got on the floor. I started as a clerk. I learned very quickly. I found a guy there that was dabbling in options. This is the early days of options, 45 years ago, and talked him into getting me on a seat. I showed him that I knew what I was doing. And then after about 3 years of making them, I didn't do very well in the very beginning. Like I, kind of was a little too big for my britches, if you will, and bought too much premium and got hammered and then dropped back, did my homework. I was a wrestler in high school. And so I really, had a lot of ability to gut it out, be disciplined. And I started the beginnings of my methodology of trading. And back then, there were gunslingers and scalpers and chartists and fundamental traders, but there really weren't any guys down there yet trading butterflies and spreads the way I did. And I did it out of safety. I was very risk averse. And then I had a 13-year career in Outcry and another 10 years with my trading operation upstairs. But I got into technology along the way, and that's really what spawned my businesses that, I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. And today I've taken that understanding into digital assets. And I have a broker dealer and a cryptocurrency company today.
All right, Tony. So what a background, a lot to take away there. I was taking notes as you were going. So you go to school for accounting, right? And you've got some headhunters coming after you, trying to get you to come work for them. And a buddy of yours just tells you about being a stockbroker at this small place in Indianapolis, and look at what it started, right? So what made you want to switch over to tech, right? Because I got to think about the time frame that you did that. Actually, what time frame was that, right? Because
Mike,
there was a point where tech was kind of like, stay away from it.
Exactly.
Right?
Oh, well, I got goosebumps because that's actually was a defining moment. And, when it was happening, you never think that this is going to change your life. But looking back, so, I went to school I was at Indiana during the 70s, and I did take Fortran, and we would carry our stack of IBM punch cards from the key punch room into the computer room, and we line up, and then we would put our stack in the card reader, and then on the big cathode ray tube, you basically would see whether your program worked, and we would have to, this was just a requirement of business school back then. And I took a couple courses, but I knew how to code at a very nascent level, but that was 7 years prior. And in 84, my trading had gotten so big. I was literally probably the biggest big mouth on the floor. I was violating position limits left and right because of the way I traded. Was very risk-free or risk-averse with multi-legs, and you just had to have a bigger position. So I got fed up with doing all this stuff by hand. And when I was a clerk, I worked with a guy who used the mainframe in town. And we had these heat-sensitive printers that were keyboards and a phone coupler. And you type in the commands to the mainframe, little Texas Instruments keyboards, and you'd get the answers back after the mainframe calculated. And I got to, I don't sleep very much. I worked around the clock, and I got to know the support guy, overnight support guy. And in 84, I said, F it, I need a computer. I need to take my current trading style and automate it. So I called him up, and he said, I don't know anything about PCs. And by the way, their PCs are for personal use. They're not business computers, because he had this giant mainframe he maintained. I'm like, you know what, Len? I'll just do my computing at home then, but help me out, right? So I taught him options, and he agreed to learn how to program in DOS. And I built my first program with him to assemble my position in the way that I looked at it. I would break down the least risky package, boxes, butterflies, calendar spreads, vertical spreads. And then what was left was my residual, and that was the risk. Because what I did, Mike, in the early days is I studied theoretical values of spreads, and I saw how the best case, worst case for these spreads based on shocking the underlying, up 15, down 15, same with vol, same with interest rates, because back then interest rates were, in the high teens, low 20s. So I knew that this model was going to have limited risk, and I would deal with the residual, the actual raw puts and calls that didn't have a home. So I built my first program then, and I used that for a couple of years, and I had a clearing firm. And then I went back to the well to do another program with the same guy about margins and haircuts and so on. And then eventually I did a voice activated simulator with a different group of guys. I taught them about options, and it was like going in a trading crowd. It was hyper interactive. I wrote a chapter for a book in the 80s called The Ecology of Pit Trading. It's out of print, but I have PDFs of my chapter. And if anyone in your audience is interested in a copy, they can hit me up on our website. But what I did back then, and I was, 29 years old, 30 years old, I had observed all the different types of traders in all these pits that range from scalpers and spreaders and position traders and point and figure chartists and fundamental people and people who like did early candlesticks. And this is before Bollinger Bands, or swing trading, but there were people who looked at momentum, stochastics, and identified all these guys. And there's a few women obviously down on the floor too at the time, and what they did as it related to options. And I wrote about the rich tapestry of liquidity that was on the floor of the CBOE. And that chapter was used in this book. It was printed for about 10 years. I changed the name eventually to The Business of Market Making. And I took those ideas and put them into interactive gaming persona, so that when we worked with Dragon voice recognition, this is 88, and you could put on the headset, train your voice on 40 words. We figured out you could interact with everybody on the floor with only 40 words, the numbers, bought, sold, a few other things. And then you would go to work to learn the business of options trading, risk management, position keeping, and P&L calculation.
So you were using like the original Siri back in the day, right? Because Dragon was like the first thing.
You're right.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's still relevant today. I think people still use it on Windows computers and stuff for certain things, right?
Voice to text, absolutely.
Yeah, voice to text is super important, especially like for accessibility reasons and things like that too, right? But so you built some of these first programs to ever be used in trading, right? So that's actually pretty amazing. Like when you're sitting here telling me that you built a program in DOS, I'm sitting here like, DOS, oh my goodness. I was like, now I was in the Navy for 20 years, right? And I still work with the Navy now as a civilian. Thank you. And we still have this program that we use for our pay, and it's in DOS, and it drives me nuts. I'm like, how are we still using this? It's like a program from 1976, I think. So, but yeah, anyway, I thought that was very interesting because like, as you're going, like, it feels like, you started that trend, at least where you were at, to kind of not really consolidate, but what's the right word I'm looking for? Like have everything, consolidate it all into one place so people have it right there at their fingertips, right? And now that they can do this, the technology was there, right? And you were able to make that happen. So with doing that, like, and from that time to now, what kind of shifts have you seen? Because I was asking about the tech thing at first because I thought you were talking about like investing in tech too, right? But how did like the early 2000s change anything for you, especially like going from 99 to 2000, the whole Y2K thing? What did that look like for you in your business?
So from that simulator period, I actually, this is so true on how software development goes for most of us. I mean, like 70 to 80% are over budget in time, over budget in dollars, right? And I learned a lot about, I did dabble in the 90s with some programming. I built out a lot of the UX widgets and stuff and Microsoft Basic and stuff such, but I really dove headfirst into technology then. And something about me that, whether I'm standing in line at a cash register at a grocery store or watching, somebody make something at a machine, something in my makeup just says, I can name that tune in 4 clicks instead of 8, or I can get you down to, workflow automation so you could do more faster with less. And the options business was all outcry at the time. And you hit the nail on the head. In 99, the internet was now becoming a commercial thing for a lot of people. My my personal domain, our company's domain, we launched it in 1990, our email domain. And there weren't a lot of people to email to, but they were out there. And then by 99, almost everybody had an email, Yahoo or some of the other services that
That was the
coming up.
most exciting thing of the early internet was when you heard it say you got mail.
You
And
got
now
mail,
it's just
right?
like, oh my God, I get enough.
They made a movie with
Yeah,
that
yeah,
name.
yeah. Yep. It was a great movie too, by the way.
Yeah,
Tom
right.
Hanks. Yeah.
And so before I actually recognized that this was, part of my makeup, it just became very evident that, once again, necessity being the mother of invention, that the options business needed optimization. So I developed a system called HEAT, Hybrid Execution and Trading. And I thought I was going to march down on the floor and eliminate the floor brokers. And little did I know the power of their relationship with their customers. So I modified that system to actually help the floor brokers do their business more efficiently. And today, 23 years later, that is still the dominant technology on the 5 outcry exchanges and upstairs, because we did upstairs, downstairs, with options like anything else in crypto. If it moves a lot, or if it's got a lot of volatility or has complexity, the bigger investors and traders don't want to just click into a machine. They want to talk to a person who has that machine, and they'll probably write it down and then systematically enter the orders. So we automated all of that. And even today, over 3,000 nodes are the predominant platform for the brokers, to do their workflow automation on the floor.
So real quick, Tony, I just want to ask you, because it sounded like when you first created this, it was to almost replace the brokers on the floor, right?
Yeah.
And then you realized that was not the right move. So you kind of switched it up to say, okay, I want you guys to be able to use this to make your job more efficient, right?
Yeah.
And now you kind of created like this small partnership, and still, found a great use for what it was that you created, and still was able to get it to blow up into what it is now. So I just wanted to
Precisely.
point that out because, sometimes you might go into something with a specific intent, right? And that might not be the right job for that particular thing, or that might not be your right mission, right? But what you have is still great for something else, right? And you were able to figure that out. I think as an entrepreneur, that's one of the most important things, right? Because every time I talk to somebody, they're like, oh yeah, I started this and it didn't really work out. However, when I did this, and kind of shifted things over and shifted my focus, man, it blew up. So I just wanted to point that out because I think that's super important, Tony. And I think that's, a great change or switch that you had for yourself.
Well, absolutely, Mike. I mean, the thing is, even in trading, we called it having a sounding board, right? So that's where these tweaks or modifications would emanate from, is by having others that you trust. Okay, maybe they're smarter than you in one area, maybe you got them in another area, but you start to discuss this collaboration. Quite often you see a mentor-mentee relationship, and I mentored a lot of people in the 80s and 90s. At one point, I had 27 traders trading for me on the floor, and they were predominantly my clerks that had come up. So you use people you trust, and they use you. You collaborate and have that sounding board aspect. Now, you could just say, fine, I'm gonna not really act upon your comments, but it's good to know. Or maybe they reinforce your comments. But in this case, it was a typical, I'm not going to be able to beat them, so I better join them. And I tweaked the system, turned it around, gave them a business lifeline, if you will, and learned a big lesson immediately that, hey, you can have the right idea, and if the crowd isn't going to embrace it, they're going to throw everything at you to, ruin you or stop you. So I doubled back, came back with something that, I partnered with one of the floor broking units, one of the bigger ones, so they could guide me to where the nerve endings were with their competitors. And that system, I ended up building into a company that I sold to the Bank of New York and GTCR, a private equity firm here in Chicago, for $250 million in 2007. And then ran that company for a little while, did my garden leave for a couple of years, and got through my non-compete and launched it again. And that company today is competing with my old company, which has been bought, repackaged, sold again 3 times, is still number 1, and mine company's number 3, chipping away at their market share.
All right, right on. So it seems like, once you set your mind to something, you push until you get to where you're trying to go. So that's definitely something. So actually, it leads me to this question that I want to ask you, Tony, for you specifically. What would you say, because man, you've done some amazing things, right? Since the time you started and you got out of college and just jumped right into it, man. But what would you say is your superpower?
I call myself Mr. What If. Okay, so I try to look at every
Hang on a second.
angle.
Does that come with a cape?
It comes with capers. No, it's basically, it's kind of mundane, but I turn over every rock. I do my ciphering, as one of my best friends always says, we got to get down and do our ciphering. So, a lot of people will do your base case, best case, worst case scenarios, but I'll look at all the variables. So that's one, that diligence, that stick-to-itiveness, and being able. So I've had at least one girlfriend in my past that I recall break up with me by saying, "You never stop thinking." So I'm always thinking about the problem at hand or the issue at hand. When we had our kids, I was constantly calculating the angles when they were walking around the house, just in case I had to jump, when they were learning to walk, and grab them before they, fell. And so it's doing the what ifs. And the previous thing that I mentioned, Mike, and that is having a knack for necessity being the mother of invention, and boiling workflow down to something that can be created and save people time and effort. So, those aren't really, it's like I don't, fly high overhead and at the speed of sound, but, I wasn't very good at math in school. I don't think I applied myself, but now I can do, basic math calculations faster than anyone. I'm always thinking ahead in terms of what valuations look like. And I think in trading, that really helped me because I could see the spread setting up. And, being a short person, everybody in the crowd was, 6 to 8 inches taller than me minimum. And you have to be fast, you have to be right. So the broker hears the right answer because I wasn't going to be in their face. So I was constantly calculating, what if he says this? What if he says that? Doing my what ifs.
Yeah, that's insane. Especially, when you think about it, just it's hard to turn it off, right? Because I'm very similar when it comes to that. And I'm constantly just thinking about like what can happen next? What's the next thing that, what do I need to be looking out for? I guess you could say the what ifs, as you say, right? It is hard to turn that off. And I think a lot of people suffer from this, right? I don't look at it as a weakness. I look at it as a strength, right? Because I'm constantly thinking about what's next, or what do I need to do next, or what's going on today? What do I need to focus on? And not turning it off. I feel like it helps keep me in line. It keeps me going, right? I don't know how some people could just turn their mind off and just relax. Relaxing is one thing, but even when I'm relaxing, I'm constantly thinking.
Well,
But
right. But being part of a team,
yeah,
being in the Navy or being part of a sports team or whatever, if you're turning something off, you're going to get whacked somehow if
yeah,
you're not
yeah,
careful.
yeah. I
But
guess it's about staying vigilant, right? Always staying vigilant,
exactly,
and not getting
vigilant with
complacent.
your risk, right? And if
Yep.
you're, and what you do with your audience in terms of educating them and helping them understand. I mean, look, there are people that just give me the right answer. I'll put my money on that square and come back and collect my winnings. But the vast majority, at least of, the tens or if not hundreds of thousands of American investors that I've interacted with over the years, they're willing to work hard at this and read and be aware. And that awareness even just carries through your normal day saying, oh my God, I heard something. I'm going to drill down and read about that. That's a company I saw. And boom, 2017, AI, early invest in Palantir, whatever, boom. So the what ifs are the fabric, if you will, of options trading. Okay, because you have so many choices. And that's just something that I've always considered myself, because I don't trust the first answer. You need to challenge that and build on it and refine it.
Absolutely. So, Tony, I want to ask you this question that I think I already know the answer to, because you asked this question at a couple different points in your life when it came to what you wanted to do with your career. But I want to ask you, what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
So the why is always the question. That's awesome. And you know what? I've been doing a bunch of podcasts here this quarter, and no one's asked me that, Mike. So
Really?
bravo for you asking me the why. People will say, you got enough money, most of your friends have retired, and so on. My why, to summarize it, is I like when a plan comes together. So my name, it means crusader of the cross. Okay. And I've always had a crusade to build something or do something. And so my why is typically to have the plan come together. I love the people I'm working with. Half my staff I've been with for 20-ish years. Okay. Young people right out of school, and now they're in their 40s and they're being groomed to be the managers and leaders of my company. And it's great to see everything work together. Obviously, there's a financial reward, but also there is a pleasure you get when a client calls you and says, wow, you guys have thought of everything, or what you didn't think of, you fixed right away. Like Galaxy Trading, which is one of the biggest in crypto assets, put us to the challenge recently and asked us to do some things, and we did it in 4 days. And they said our current supplier took 4 months to do that. So the why is to get that positive feedback from your staff growing, plan coming together. Clients, it's a heady thing when people are happy with what you do. Obviously, it's a form of flattery. And that's one of the things that keeps you going. I mean, there's failures along the way. You figure them out. You build on top of that. And selling Liquid Point was a culmination of that. Launching Matrix, and then I handed off last year to my number 2, and that's running really well. Was a great feeling and a culmination. So, I don't know if I'll do another one after Liquid Mercury. I do have some other ideas that are tangential, but I'll give this another 5 or 6 years to really build it into a powerhouse and fulfill that why. Here's why we're doing it. And then hopefully leave some legacies with the people you work. I've employed nearly 1,000 people in the various businesses I started over the years. And I mean, I take that back. The families of my employees are right around 1,000. It's been in the hundreds of the multiple companies that I've had. And in the 90s, when we were training young men and women in the banks of Europe and Asia and Australia how to trade options, we touched the lives of over 8,000. And a lot of those people are running desks today. And we gave them the aha factor of options. So it's gratifying in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tony, I appreciate that, kind of digging into your brain a little bit there to understand your why. But I also want to ask you, it's kind of like another why question, but you started off in stocks, right? And your focus was always there. You had mentioned that, you are in crypto as well, right? And I feel like, well, actually, one of the things I want to ask you is what made you get into crypto, right? Because a lot of people that are hardcore stock traders shy away from crypto, right?
Mhm.
I've had my doubts, right? But I've also had stuff that worked out, but I've had my doubts with crypto. So why crypto?
Well,
And what specific crypto do you like?
okay, so I learned about Bitcoin in late '09 because one of my colleagues, Nick Colas, who is our head of research, wrote a early morning email research piece that I read religiously because I love Nick. He was great, and I always wanted to hear what he had to say. So for about 2 or 3 months, he wrote about this new thing that was coming out. And then in January of 2010, when it launched, he stopped writing about it. And I moved on back to equities and options, forgot about it completely. Thing was trading at 10 cents or whatever, forgot about it completely for 7 years. And then in early 2017, I was having breakfast and somebody said, "You see that Bitcoin crossed $2,000?" I was like, wait a minute. I remember that from back then. And I jumped back in. And the reason why I got into it at that point was because it was very reminiscent of the early 70s in the launch of listed options, okay, where there was an underlying thesis or technology, the theoretical valuation of options that a lot of people didn't know about or care about. There was the technology of executing and routing, where today, 50 years later, or that in 2017, 45 years later, was, dramatic. Having the skill set of moving tons of options around with my previous businesses, I'm like, this is ripe for what we did in options in the 90s and in the aughts, and what we're doing today with Matrix in the teens. So I launched Mercury Digital Assets, and we changed the name last year to Liquid Mercury. Why? As I said earlier, every time a big player in, 2017, there weren't a lot of big players in the space. There were market makers. Donnie Wilson and the guys at Jump and others were taking their options expertise and have moved in as liquidity providers. But the sell side, the agents, the jobbers, the people who talk to clients who said, I got this fund, I got to go ahead to allocate, 2% to digital assets. Here's what we're thinking. Can you find me offers? Okay. Those folks, the agents, the sell side, is what we service like no one else. So we took that knowledge. We were early. We built out infrastructure for them, tool sets for them, selling to the buy side too, because our stuff could be used for the buy side. And now all the big names are, after, FTX put a chilling effect on decision making for a year, but those companies are like, okay, that was fraud. That's been adjudicated. There's been a lot of changes implemented to help avoid fraudsters like SBF. And they're coming to the table now and saying, we got to get ready. Why? Because our clients are demanding it. Look at what Schwab and Fidelity, abject competitors for the last 40 years, launched an exchange that is just their clients. Fidelity has over 43 million of their accounts under the digital umbrella. They can trade crypto. Okay. Now, crypto is a word for the cryptocurrencies, the movers and shakers of digital assets. There's a buzzword or buzz phrase that your audience probably is aware of: real world assets, RWA. Digitization, tokenization is happening and coming to RWA in a big way. Okay. You go by a large building, Willis Tower, formerly Sears Tower here. It's owned by the Willis Corporation. But with tokenization, they could offer tiny fractional shares, if they wanted to, as an example, to people like you or I who just want to put up $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever. It would never happen in today's world due to the paperwork, the weight of analog documentation administration says that stuff's not worth it. With tokenization, it's a click. Okay. The smart contract has all the information in it. and it's immutable. It's on. I mean, blockchain is accounting. It's boring, but digital.
Yeah. I was going to say, because
ledger.
it's on the blockchain and now it's recorded and that's it. And you can't change that, right?
Right.
So I have heard of, like, so especially as a real estate agent, it's been, in the talks, and it's happened in a couple areas, but titles going out on a blockchain, right, and being tokenized. That is something that, is the future, right? Instead of sitting down with a lawyer or a title company, it's going to be as simple as a couple clicks, and now you have the deed to the house, right?
Mike, I'm telling you, it's happening. Okay.
I've
It's,
heard of it happening in a couple other
yes,
states. So,
it's happening. Like Wyoming is leading the charge in this,
mhm.
Florida, Texas, and about a dozen others. Those are states we're working with. But here's the thing. Anything, I'm involved with a company that uses our technology for not-for-profit altruistic purposes. Okay, why? Little known fact that most museums and art establishments, art galleries, have about 75% of their artwork in storage, and they rotate it around. They just don't have enough room for all the art that they've collected. Okay. And the other thing is that everybody probably knows is that it's hard for them to make money. So they have donors, they have people that contribute to these museums and galleries. Okay. Not just refining that, not telling anybody anything new. But what this company has done is created a process to allow a would-be donor. Now, if you want to support the local art museum and you want to give them $50, they'll take your $50, but it's almost as much of a hassle as taking the $50. They're looking for people to put in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and sometimes even millions of dollars towards their effort. But with the tokenization of the artwork in storage and the presentation of that digitally, your eye as a interested party to help that establishment out can own an NFT, a non-fungible token, and one of a kind of, the Mona Lisa, let's say, but obviously there's a million art pieces of art beyond that would be eligible. And you still get to donate. They get their donation, and the smart token locks in the fact that you own that digital representation of that piece of art. Could be forever, could be for a period of time. And then they go on our platform and people can swap them out. So if you want to exchange, you got the Mona Lisa, I got Van Gogh's Starry Starry Night, and we flip it. And now, you keep it for 6 months and flip it. And those trade, and the establishment gets a little big every time that trades. You can't do that in the analog world. That's just an example of tokenization of real world purposes. We're doing it with carbon credits, with RINs and RECs, and being able to take these truckers' slips, tokenize them, help them avoid fraud, the auditing that goes on, the dealing with the EPA and the IRS, just on their iPad. So
yeah,
Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana, those movers, that's great. That's just proving out the concept. Okay. What
that's just
comes
proving out
next?
blockchain.
Yes, proving
Yeah.
out blockchain, proving that the everyman could access it and get value out of it. And then from there, you're going to see this whole wave. And you hit the nail on the head when you asked me about 99 to 2000. It was kind of the awakening of the internet age in terms of commerce and investing. AOL was a few years old, but not really getting the kind of traction that they would see in the next few years. That's what's ahead of us here with digital assets as the infrastructure gets built out and becomes really cost effective for everybody to use it. And that's what we do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's amazing, Tony. And it's the future, right? And I think I know, the general reason why, like, you directly got into crypto and just blockchain in general, it's going back to what you said about yourself, the what ifs, right? You're always thinking about the what ifs. So you got in because you saw this coming and you're like, okay, what if this blows up? What if this happens? What if that happens? I need to get in this. And you did, right? So I feel like that is like, that really is your superpower. So,
Well, some people say I'm, I hate to use the term, a creative, G word, but I'm the son of a carpenter. I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, wore, Sears denim pants when everybody was wearing Levi's and Lee jeans. But I look at things from the blood and guts, mundane side of, like that's why your show is so pertinent. Just the average guy. I do all my what ifs, and what comes out looks creative because I've turned over every rock and thought of every angle or as many as I could, and becomes a creative, genius sort of delivery. But I'm also really good at using Excel too, so it's helped me a
yeah.
lot.
No, hey, that skill sets are required, right? You can't
Yes.
just constantly be curious and not have any type of skills, because
Right.
otherwise
Yeah,
you're just going to be curious all the time.
yeah.
And then you'd be a philosopher, not doing what you're doing now. So, all
Right.
right, Tony, I'd like to transition this now into something that I call the final round. It's where I'm
Sure.
going to ask you the same four questions that I ask everybody that comes on the show. It gives us a sneak peek into your brain a little bit deeper when you're under a little bit of pressure, which really it's not that bad. But if you're ready to go, we'll get that party started.
Yes.
Okay, Tony. So the first question of the final round is, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made when it comes to your finance or business life?
Biggest mistake I've ever made was not, in hindsight, not investing in the stock market during the 0809 meltdown. I didn't fight it, but I also ignored it. I've trusted people too much in some cases. I backed some guys that were unscrupulous and took me to the cleaners in the early days when I was in my early 30s, but probably missing the bottom. Yeah. There's a whole story behind that. I look at that because I was told this is the bottom, and I didn't believe the guy because he had been wrong so many times before, and I haven't talked to him since.
Okay, that's one way. But no, I appreciate your transparency there. Definitely not easy to talk about when you have such a big loss, right?
Yeah.
But this next question kind of ties into it, and it's what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first started out?
The value of intellectual properties. Two of my creations were stolen from me. One due to my naivete, the other very close after that from family member relatives that worked for me because they knew that I wasn't looking, if you will, and took my ideas, dressed them up a slight amount, and ran with it. They sold that for, something shy of $20 million. And then I retooled and got more than 10 times that for the same idea, but in a bigger scale. It just that those two occasions, I was young and unwitting or unknowledgeable.
All right, fair enough, fair enough. Okay, this next question, Tony, kind of ties into that too,
Mhm.
but it's, do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to someone that is just getting started out today?
Well, it's kind of unfair. My whole thing is about options trading. So I believe that options trading allows the individual to represent their investing ideas, risk reward profile, how close to the flame they can get, what allows them to sleep at night, whatever metaphor you want to use. Options allows you to meet that out to the greatest degree. Now, having said that, if you have a small amount of money to invest, your paths are very limited as it is. You can't go out and, buy 100 shares of, Apple or Amazon if you only have a few $1,000s. So for somebody that the capital can meet out their needs, then you need to go into options. Okay. So once that is set as the premise or the backdrop, things that we've already talked about, Mike, doing your what ifs, okay, being disciplined, doing the homework to understand your risk reward. In the early 90s, I met two psychological investors, Mark Douglas, who's passed, and Van Tharp, who's still with us, and they had written a number of books. And I got to work with them in 1991, 92 about the psychology of trading and try to understand enough the zones and the discipline required to trade and that mentality. So I would look up their works, and there's others that are their disciples and that have come since then to help internalize what's going on in the marketplace. I mean, if you're just buying, investing, and forgetting for long term, a lot of this isn't as important. But using options, doing your homework, staying disciplined, understanding your psychological makeup, what you can and can't do based on your predilections, that's kind of the beginning of what is your trading persona.
All right, awesome. So Tony, it's funny that you mentioned books and stuff for people to check out, because that's my next question for you. And that is, do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast that you like, or both?
So I think that anybody in the markets, in the stock market, futures, options, should read Reminiscences of a Stock Operator by Jesse Livermore. It's a thin book written about 100 years ago, but has a lot of those psychological components in it and probably would be worth rereading. So that's an old favorite. There's a book that popularized interviews with traders, Market Wizards, which I'm the only options trader in the original volume that Jack Schwager wrote 35 years ago. Market Wizards is also an interesting book, not because I'm in it, but because the other 13 men and women that are in it have great stories. And there's a theme that runs through all of ours about our discipline and how we handle stress and pressure and how we stay disciplined. So those are two fun books to read. Shelley Natenberg has written a book about options and volatility, also about 35 years ago. It's an easy read. It's a fun read. I've written 4 books on options that are more workbooks. So I'm very option centric. And yeah, those come off the top of my head. If
Right
people
on.
want to hit me at liquidmercury.com, I answer the stuff myself. And
So Tony, that's actually my next question for you, right? Because the final round's done. My next
cool.
question for you now, and this is the most important question, right? Because people listen to this episode and they're like, man, I need to get to know this what if guy a little bit better, right? That might even be the name of this episode. Meet the what if guy, Tony Saliba. All right. Anyway, so Tony, this question is super important because the folks that are listening are like, hey, I do want to learn more. I want to learn more about his programs. I want to learn more about options trading. And he seems like the guy or the resource to go to. I want to learn more about crypto, whatever it might be. So where can people find more information about you? Do you have a website you could share with us, but you kind of talked about that a little bit? Any social media profiles we could follow? Anything like that? Obviously, you said you had books too that were more workbooks. Where can we find those? Give us the goods.
So liquidmercury.com, www.liquidmercury.com, one connected word, 2 words connected, is our website. We have our own cryptocurrency, if you will, the Merc. It's a smart contract that trades on, by the time your audience is watching this, probably about 5 exchanges, maybe more. We have the tokenomics, on our website. Talks about what you get, with the Merc and how cool it is. Also, I will respond either personally directly or in a group if people hit us up with questions. I mentioned the chapter from my 1984 to 1994 chapter that was in the options book that the CBOE printed during those years. It's about the rich tapestry of Pit Trading Ecology. It's an insight to individuals and their persona on how they made money trading. So if you go to liquidmercury.com, you can catch me there. I'm on LinkedIn, Tony Saliba. I'm on Twitter. As we got a couple handles. One is Power Pro Digital Trading. I believe that's what it is. And then also my books are on Amazon. And under my name, I have 4 of them: the Options Workbook, Strategies for Directionless Markets, which talks about my stock and trade butterfly trades. And like I said, anybody that hits me up and mentions Average Joe Finance, I'll answer personally.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you so much again for taking the time on a Saturday to join me and share your story with our audience, and just, share just the journey that you've had, the amazing journey that you've had since, the mid 80s till now, and how you've endured all that change, right? And I wouldn't say really endured, more like adapted to, right? You just constantly adapt to the environment around you. You're kind of like a lizard, right? Like a gecko, right? That kind of just sits on the thing and changes colors to whatever it needs to.
Chameleon, yes.
Oh yeah, chameleon. Sorry, I'm
Yes.
saying gecko. We got geckos all over Hawaii running everywhere. So
Yeah.
but no, Tony, I really appreciate it. This was really fun. It was eye-opening, and just to hear your story and just learn about you and just your journey itself. So again, thank you
Thanks,
so
Mike.
much.
Thanks, Mike. Next time we'll talk about my ayahuasca journey that I took.
Right. Awesome. Hey, I also want to thank all of my listeners. I want to thank you all so very much for joining me and our special guest, Tony Saliba, on the Average Joe Finances podcast. Go leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you like about today's episode with Tony. Aloha from Hawaii, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.